Blessed morning. Welcome in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Welcome to our live stream viewers. I'm Pastor Ellingworth from St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church in Waverly, Iowa. And we are doing an ongoing study of 2 Kings. I do apologize to the people that might be viewing online. I don't have the capability of sharing my screen with you. So please open your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 16. 2 Kings 16. Second Kings chapter 16. So for those of you here in church, after church, do you have your Kings list? Does anybody need a Kings list? Please come and get a Kings list and distribute a few Kings lists. Thank you. Because at this point in the study of 2 Kings, we're going through a lot of Kings very quickly. So the current king in the northern kingdom at the time of chapter 16, that is Pekah. You see him in the right-hand column of the king's list for the northern kingdom, and he reigns for 20 years, and there's only one more king after Pekah in the northern kingdom, and then it says fall of Israel to the Assyrians in BC 722. Now compare that to the left-hand column. Our current king is Ahaz in chapter 16. So the southern kingdom is going to go on for a bit longer, but look at the end of that column. The southern kingdom, the fall of Judah happens to the Babylonians in 586 BC. So I'm not good with math. What's 722 minus 586, John?
100 years and a half.
Let's say 150 years roughly. So by 586, all of what we know of as Israel has been conquered and destroyed. The temple in the southern kingdom is destroyed. The northern kingdom was carted off to the nation known as Assyria, and the southern kingdom was carted off to the nation known as Babylon. Now, to show this on the maps, I don't really have a map that covers that very well. I mean, this is probably the best one here. Oh, goodness. This is Assyria, but all this yellow, but you see the yellow goes all around here, you know? Assyria was a huge empire, and right next to it is Babylon, Babylonia, and that's this green area. So these two empires together, first the Assyrians, they attack the northern kingdom of Israel and cart their people away to Assyria. That's in 722. And then Babylon comes down into Judah and conquers Judah, the southern kingdom, and carts them away to Babylon. So they're both kind of going the same direction. And also, the people of the north are also known as Aram, and the people of the south are known as, I forget their names, Ammon. So there's Aram and Ammon, and they were two brothers that were sons of Shem, one of the sons of Noah. And, well, think about this, you know, before the flood, everybody that lived was descended from Adam and Eve. And then the flood wipes everybody out except for Noah and his wife and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, which they're all still descendants of Adam and Eve, of course. But now the world is populated by the descendants of Adam and his family. So these three sons, particularly, Shem, you know, that's where we get Semite from, right? We think of the Hebrew people, the Jewish people are Semites, right? If you're against the Semites, you're an anti-Semite, right? That's not something you want to be. There's also the sons of Ham and the sons of Japheth as well. So anyway, these people, I guess is my point, Ammon and Aram are descended from Shem, as are the people of Israel. So, I mean, they're all kind of related in a way. Then again, aren't we all kind of related in some way, right? So anyway, I'm just trying to confuse you so that when we get into greater confusion, you'll be really confused. That's the goal here, is confusion. Also, we're talking about this King Ahaz. Let me tell you a little bit about Ahaz. I'm reading from this commentary. I read this morning. I thought, well, that's really helpful. It says that Ahaz had a father and a grandfather who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. There's a reason that the southern kingdom exists a little bit longer than the northern kingdom. And that's because, in general, even though the kings of the southern kingdom were not perfect, they did more that was right in the eyes of the Lord than the kings of the northern kingdom. But they still didn't get rid of the high places where Baal and Ashtaroth and Chemosh were worshipped. They allowed what we would call syncretism, the worship of God alongside the worship of false gods. They were mixing religious elements together, borrowing a little bit from the pagans, incorporating it into Judaism, that kind of thing. But anyway, King Ahaz, his father and his grandfather were two fairly good kings who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. But Ahaz did not. He worshiped idols. He offered his sons as sacrifices to Molech and Milcom. Now, these are two gods that I showed you pictures of. This guy would be Milcom, or Chemosh is another one. He's on the board up there, sorry. The king or god of the Assyrians. There's also, that's Molech. You might have seen this meme. It's been used now for social political issues because people sacrifice their children to the god Molech. And so somebody has taken this idea of Planned Parenthood and Moloch worship. Here's another image of the god Moloch. Got a head like a bull. I don't know what those little doors or shelves are in his chest, but in his body, down at the bottom is an oven, right? Burnt sacrifice of children is what this god required. So King Ahaz here, he offered his sons as sacrifices to these gods. And this is recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 28, that it happened more than once. Apparently, he dabbled also in astrology, reading the stars to predict the future, and to, instead of consulting God as to what he should do, he consulted the stars. He dedicated, he set up horses and chariots and dedicated to the sun and altars on the roof near the upper room of Ahaz. There was a stairway that he might have used as a sundial and also as an instrument in his astrology. So anyway, we get all this stuff from suppositions from the scripture, things that are said there that suggest he dabbled in these different things. Therefore, because of this, God has stepped in with a judgment. He says that the alliance of Israel and Aram, so the northern kingdom and Syria up here, those two align against the southern kingdom of Judah, is a constant threat to Ahaz's power. But still, because the southern kingdom in the past has been more good than the northern kingdom, more faithful than the northern kingdom, God has a soft spot for the southern kingdom. Remember, this is where the temple is. This is where David was established. And he says, I will not leave you. My presence will not turn away from Jerusalem, And God wants to keep this. But I always remind you, it's like God will not turn away from us, but we can certainly turn away from him. And that is what is happening here. So when Ahaz, the gross idolater, stood helpless before the enemies from the north threatening him, the prophet Isaiah comes. See, the prophet Isaiah is writing during this time. We talked a little bit about this last week. And he announces to King Ahaz that don't be afraid. God is protecting you. He is not going to let the northern kingdom, with their alliance with Syria, overtake you. The kings of Israel and Aram would not enter Jerusalem, the Lord promised through Isaiah. And Isaiah pleaded with Ahaz to trust the Lord's promise. He even invited Ahaz to ask the Lord for a sign. But when Ahaz, in a mock show of piety and humility, refused to ask for a sign, then Isaiah the prophet became angry, and he declared the Lord himself will give you a sign. And here's the sign. The virgin will conceive and bear a son, and shall call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And of course, that's Isaiah 7:14, which is a direct prophecy of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And at this unusual moment, God again reminded the world of that virgin-born Savior who would come into the world through the family of Ahaz. Now listen to this. So as bad and wicked as this king is, if you don't mind turning quickly to Matthew chapter 1, the Gospel of Matthew. I got it up on the board there too. Matthew's Gospel starts out with a genealogy of Jesus Christ. So the very first verse says, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And it starts, as you might expect, Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac was the father of Jacob, Jacob was the father of Judah and all of his brothers. And as you read on through this list, you see Tamar there. Remember, Tamar was, yes, she wasn't really a prostitute, but she pretended to be a prostitute to deceive, was that Judah? Not Judah. Yeah. It was one of the Reuben, one of the sons. I forget which one. Sorry about that. But anyway, continuing on through that list, we start to get into some names we know from Kings, right? Well, we got Boaz in there, Rahab and Boaz. Rahab was the prostitute who hid the spies in her apartment in Jericho, right? And she put the red scarf or something outside her window. Boaz, of course, was the kinsman redeemer of Ruth. And he became the father of Obed, who became the father of Jesse, who became the father of David. Okay, you see how these people are factored into this genealogy of Jesus. And then David is the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. I love this genealogy. It doesn't try to cover up the disgrace, does it? You know, if this was what we would call hagiographical, that is trying to show a very pretty picture of the people in this line, then it wouldn't say that David was the father of Solomon by another man's wife. It wouldn't put it that way. It would just say maybe David was the father of Solomon or something like that. But it would leave out that gory detail, right? But no, the gory detail is in there. Solomon's the father of Rehoboam. Now these are the kings we know: Abijah, Asaph, etc., Jehoshaphat, Joram, the father of Uzziah. You get down here to verse 9, and you see the father of Ahaz, who we're talking about presently, and Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah. So Ahaz becomes a very wicked king in the southern kingdom. Remember, Ahab was the very wicked king of the northern kingdom, the one that had Jezebel as his wife. So now the southern kingdom has its own wicked king. But the guy who comes after him, his son Hezekiah, is a very good king and sets about reform in Judah. Anyway, that list continues on: Amos, Josiah, Jehechaniah, and then the Babylonian deportation.
A little much further, we're going to find John's father. Your father, John.
My father?
Technically.
Oh, John's father.
Keep going here.
Have to look for an Edward.
All right, I just wanted to show you that this king that we're talking about is important for a lot of reasons, because it was to him that Isaiah, actually in frustration and anger, because he told the king, ask God for any sign you want and he'll give it to you. A sign, because the king's terrified that the northern kingdom and Syria are going to come and conquer them. And so Ahaz says it's not going to happen. And to prove it, to make your heart still, ask God for a sign. He'll give it to you. And Ahaz, who is no God-fearer, who sacrifices his sons to Molech and Chemosh, says, oh no, I could never ask of God a sign. I would not do such a thing. He acts like he's all pious and faithful, and he's not. And so Isaiah says to him, well, then I'll tell you what's going to happen. God's going to give you a sign. And the sign is the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel, which is God with us. Obviously, there's more to it than that. But Ahaz still wouldn't budge. He was determined to trust man, not God, for his salvation. Now, the Hebrew word translated as save here is related to Jesus. Of course, the name Jesus means God saves or God is salvation. So there's a strong prophecy of God is going to save the people, and even an indication of how he's going to do it. It's going to be through a birth, a very unusual birth, a virgin birth. Now, this was promised all the way back in Genesis 3:15, right? After Adam and Eve sinned, God gives the promise in Genesis 3:15 that the seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. And even Paul in the New Testament, he says something that's often wildly misunderstood and therefore very offensive to people. It says that the woman shall be saved by childbearing. And all the feminists get all upset because they're like, oh, we got to have babies. That's how we're going to be saved. But the men, they just have to trust in Jesus. Well, that's not what it means at all. It's pointing to how God is going to bring about salvation. How did he bring about salvation? Through his son, who was born of what? A woman, a virgin woman. That was the promise, And so we're all saved by childbearing. That's the whole point. We all come into this world, children of our mothers and our fathers, inheriting the sin that they had, right? That goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. But there's going to be a man who's born of a woman who doesn't have that sin. And that is Jesus, is what it's pointing at. So there's a lot going on here. The king of Assyria literally became a savior. So last week I talked about typology, how things in the Old Testament are somewhat fulfilled in their time, but they're still pointing forward to an even greater fulfillment. So this idea that the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and he shall save his people from their sins and all that, obviously the ultimate fulfillment is in Jesus. But there were many fulfillments along the way. And one of these fulfillments came in a very unlikely fashion. It came from the Assyrian Empire helping Judah to ward off the attack of the northern kingdom. So sometimes an alliance with somebody who's not really your friend. What's that saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, that's the way that goes. You're not really friends, but you both have the same enemy, so we can work together here. So it's a little bit like that. The whole point is that this is God's machination. He is the one protecting Judah, and he does it in ways that often we would never think of, that don't make sense to us. Or he takes the bad things we do and somehow brings a good out of it we didn't mean and never would have intended. Okay, I just wanted to give you a little bit of that background there before we started reading 16. So let's read 16. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Pekah is the king of the northern kingdom, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, was king of Judah, and he began to reign. He was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God, as his father David had done. By the way, you might have noticed that all the kings of the southern kingdom are compared to David, right? They either did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, like David had done, or they didn't do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, like David had done. But in the northern kingdom, they all go back to the first king of the northern kingdom, Jeroboam. And the thing about Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that's the way he's always referred to in Kings, is he's the one that set up the 2 golden calves on the high places and made the people worship there instead of going down to Jerusalem. So he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God, as his father David had done, but he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, of the northern kingdom. He walked in their evil ways. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations, the pagans, whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places and on the hills and on every green tree. All right, so this goes back to, remember when Joshua led the people of Israel into the promised land, into the land of Canaan. God, we've talked about this before, God was very clear what they were to do with the people who dwelt there. Wipe them out. Leave not one of them alive, man, woman, or child, you know? And of course, they didn't do that. They kept plunder for themselves. They kept the women and the children and the animals, killed a lot of the men. Why did God say to do this heartless thing? You know, well, it was because of idolatry. You know, he wants his people to be pure, to worship him alone. God is a jealous God. He will not share you with another God. Not that there truly are other gods to share you with. And he knew that if they were allowed to live some of the people to live, particularly the women, that they would take them as wives. They would in time adopt their gods, and the people would be corrupt. And that's exactly what happened, almost from the get-go. But what we're seeing now is the logical conclusion of that. I mean, this sin has been festering and growing for generations now, hundreds of years, and now it has reached this incredible point where they're sacrificing their children to Moloch and Chemosh. You know, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, so the king of Syria, northern kingdom, King Pekah, they went together to wage war on the southern kingdom and on Jerusalem. And they besieged Ahaz. So they surrounded the city. You know, we've talked about siege warfare. They don't let anything in. They don't let anything out. But they couldn't conquer him. This is because of the Lord's protection, right? God had said through the prophet Isaiah that they will not enter Jerusalem. They'll surround Jerusalem, make things miserable for a time, but they're not going to come in. At that time, Rezin, the king of Syria, recovered Elath for Syria and drove the men of Judah from Elath, and the Edomites came to Elath, where they dwell to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. All right, so he's appealing now to Syria. Now, I just showed you that map earlier where Assyria is up here. This says Syria too. This is very confusing. I did a little reading on this, and this confusion that I'm having is a common confusion because Assyria and Syria are very similar in sound. And frankly, their lineage it's from two brothers from the same family, you know. It's all garbly gooked up, you know, and they're very close to each other, these two kingdoms, but they're not the same. I can't really clarify it for you any better than that, unfortunately. Not at this time, at least. This is something I'm going to continue to ponder and try to get clearer on. But anyway, what we have here is we have the northern kingdom and Aram combining together against the south. And so now the southern kingdom is joining with Assyria to go against them. These mutual alliances, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that kind of thing. Let's see. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and rescue me. Who's he appealing to? An enemy to come up and rescue me. Sure, I'll help. Rescue me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel, who are attacking me. Now remember, it's been promised to him that they will not enter Jerusalem. God has promised that. Ask for a sign as high as the heavens, as deep as Sheol. No. I would never bother God with such a thing. So he's not trusting the Lord, right? He's trusting in his own machinations. So Ahaz took the silver and the gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house, and he sent a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria listened to him. The king of Assyria marched up against Damascus and took it, carrying its people captive to Kir, and he killed Rezin, the king of Syria. Okay, so that worked, at least for now. When King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, he saw the altar that was at Damascus, altar to the Assyrian gods, which are Chemosh, right? The ones you sacrifice children to. He saw the altar that was at Damascus, and King Ahaz sent to Uriah the priest a model of the altar and its pattern, exact in all its details. And Uriah the priest built the altar in accordance with all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. So Uriah the priest made it before King Ahaz arrived from Damascus. And when the king came from Damascus, the king viewed the altar. Then the king drew near to the altar and went up on it and burned his burnt offering and his grain offering and poured his drink offering and threw the blood of the peace offering on the altar. So he's made a copy of the pagan altar to Chemosh in Syria, in Damascus. He's made it and he set it up in Jerusalem. And the offerings that are supposed to go to God on God's altar in the temple are now being poured out on this mock altar of the false god Chemosh. That's what's going on here. Does this sound good? No. Is this going to make God pleased? No. And the king came from Damascus. He viewed the altar. He drew near to the altar, went up on it, burned his burnt offering, his grain offering, poured his drink offering, threw the blood of the peace offering on the altar. And the bronze altar that was before the Lord, he removed it away from the front of the house, from the place between his altar and the house of the Lord. He put it on the north side of the altar. He put it in some back corner somewhere. And King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, saying, on the great altar, burn the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, with the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering, and throw on it all the blood of the burnt offering. So basically, have all the sacrifices on this new altar to this god Chemosh. But the bronze altar, the one he had moved away, he's going to use it to inquire by. See, this is one of these things that he's going to use it for some kind of soothsaying, fortune-telling sort of thing. It was even suggested that, I don't know what they call this, but have you heard about where they take the entrails of an animal, like the intestines and the liver and the kidneys, and they feel them, and supposedly they can predict the future or some omen out of this? There's a word for it. I don't know what it is. That he was doing this kind of stuff. I mean, after all these animals and maybe even people are being sacrificed on this altar. There's probably lots of this kind of stuff to work with, right? Necromancing is speaking to the dead. So it's not that, but there is a word for it. I think it's part of voodoo worship out of Haiti and Africa. Verse 17 says that King Ahaz cut off the frames of the stands and removed the basins from them. He took down the sea from off the bronze oxen that were under it and put it on a stone pedestal and covered the covered way for the Sabbath that had been made. Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble reading today. That had been built inside the house, and the outer entrance for the king he caused to go around the house of the Lord. So he did all of these things to impress Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, whose help he wants, right? Whose help he has received, but he wants to please this king. And he is desecrating the temple of the Lord. He is using it for pagan worship of a false god. This is really just showing the depths of the depravity that the southern kingdom now has fallen to. The northern kingdom's already been there, you know. Now the southern kingdom too is succumbing. So we're heading to a very bad place. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaz that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And Ahaz slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Hezekiah his son reigned in his place. Okay. How are we doing? I know this is a little confusing. I'm trying to pull out the stuff that kind of gives you, this is what the gist of the whole thing is, you know. Please.
Okay, where, time-wise, where does Daniel come in?
Well, Daniel's during the Babylonian captivity,
When
so
was he born? Was he born before when these kings were there?
well, I don't know that off the top of my head,
Daniel
but
was a teenager when he was captured.
yeah, that's right.
So what,
Yeah, because they were in captivity for 70 years and he died in Babylon.
so what king was he under when they were
Well,
captured? It would have been
under Zedekiah.
Isaiah, okay. Was he a good king?
We'll find out. We're not there yet.
Don't rule it. It's
Okay,
just.
all right.
I don't think so. Okay, chapter 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, the son of Elah, so now we're talking about the northern kingdom. He's the last king of the northern kingdom, began to reign in Samaria over Israel. He reigned 9 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, yet not as the kings of Israel who were before him. So he's bad, but he wasn't as bad as Ahab, right? Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria. So this is a different king of Assyria. And Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found treachery in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt. That's right. Okay. Yes. And offered no tribute to the king of Assyria. All right. So the northern kingdom, you know, they're making these treaties or these agreements with Syria, but they're also keeping Egypt in their back pocket. You know, it gets. And he offered no tribute to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded all the land and came to Samaria for 3 years and besieged it. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried the Israelites away to Assyria. And he placed them in Hala on the harbor of the river Gozan in the cities of the Medes. So this is now 722. This is the what we'd call the Assyrian captivity. Assyria has conquered the northern kingdom and has captured many of the people and taken them away, carried them away in exile to Assyria. The southern kingdom is still intact for another 150 plus years.
Do you suppose the blacks that are talking about having been in slavery read this and say, well, it's happened to lots of other people too?
Outside of this country, yes, they would talk about that and recognize that. But here, it's culturally and politically expedient to just ignore those background histories. They would probably even say, well, these histories were written by white people, you know, to tell it their way, you know. I mean, that's this whole, 1619 project or something like that. It's a retelling of American history that shows that from day one, it's been intentionally racist for the purpose of suppressing people of minorities or something like that. You know, because even math is racist, you know, and logic is racist. Didn't you know that? 2 + 2 = 4 is racist. This all occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. All right, this is going to be like a recapping of long period of history. It takes it back to the Exodus, right? How God has been faithful to the people and how they immediately started falling into idolatry. So be prepared for this. This is just a big overarching swath of Old Testament history here. This occurred because people of Israel sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods and walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs that the kings of Israel had practiced. And the people of Israel did secretly against the Lord their God things that were not right. They built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. They set up for themselves pillars and asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. And they made offerings on all the high places, as the nations did, whom the Lord carried away before them. And they did wicked things, provoking the Lord to anger. And they served idols, of which the Lord had said to them, "You shall not do this." So he's talking about the whole history of Israel here, from the Exodus to the present day, where the Assyrians come in and conquer the northern kingdom. This is why it happened. This is God's judgment upon Israel. Now, God was patient. God was long-suffering. This is hundreds of years that the country was allowed to go on, and all the things that happened to them along the way were opportunities for them to repent and return to the Lord. And sometimes they did, and then immediately backslid into the same old again. So God is patient, and he will give time, but that time will come to an end. Where am I at? 13? I don't even see 13. Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes in accordance with all the law that I commanded your fathers and that I sent to you by my servants, the prophets." Well, we've heard about two major prophets, right? Elijah and Elisha, but there's been others. How about when Jesus comes, roughly 700 years later? What does he say when he comes into Jerusalem? "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those whom God has sent to you. How often would I have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." That's what Jesus says. He's talking about this same kind of history of apostasy and idolatry. But they would not listen. They were not willing. They were stubborn, as their fathers had been before them, who did not believe in the Lord their God. They despised his statutes, his laws, and his covenant that he made with their fathers. Remember the covenant blessing given to Abraham, that through a son of your own flesh, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And I will give you this land to your descendants for generations to come. They will be as numerous as the stars in the heaven. Anyway, they forsake all of these things. They despise God's commandments. They despise his covenant that he made with the fathers, the warnings he gave them. They went after false idols, and they became false. And they followed the nations, the pagans, the Gentiles that were around them, concerning whom the Lord had commanded them they should not do like them. All of those laws that we hear about, like in Leviticus, like don't drink blood. The reason God gives them those commandments, it's really twofold. But the one about blood is, well, first of all the commandments were about don't do this. Why? Because the pagan nations all around you do this, and you are not like them. I have chosen you, and I have set you apart, which means I have sanctified you. I made you holy. You're not to be like them. Don't copy what they do. When the pagans drink the blood of an animal, they believe that they are gaining the strength and the power of that animal, like a bull or something. And I will be like a bull. And frankly, this goes into cannibalism. There's some cultures where cannibalism is practiced. What they often think is that it's kind of a way of honoring their enemy by eating them. because I honor you, O king, whom I have defeated, and your wisdom will become my wisdom. Your strength will become my strength. That kind of thing. You will live on in me, that kind of thing. No, I agree. But anyway, that was the idea there. Scarification. People in the pagan nations around Israel scarred their body as a way of worshiping the dead and that kind of thing. And so the Israelites were told, don't do this. Do not mark your body. People ask today, does that mean tattoos? I think so. And you ask people, why did you get that tattoo? Oh, it's a memorial of some event in my life or someone. People do things for stupid reasons. I got a penguin on my shoulder. Isn't it cute? That kind of thing. But there's a lot of scarification going on. There's these things that people put in their ears that make their ears super the holes. Yeah. We even have pastors that have those things. Right here in Iowa.
People cut their bodies.
Yeah, people cut their bodies, right? Yeah. Well, we heard that in First Kings, I think it was, the prophets of Baal, to get Baal to answer them and take the sacrifice. He wasn't answering it because he doesn't exist. They started slashing their bodies till the blood was gushing everywhere. They were doing this in worship of a demon god. And I know today people, they cut themselves because they're depressed, they're sad. It's a cry for help is the way it's explained. Yeah, it's also demonic quite often. It's Satan who screws with our minds to make us to want to hurt ourselves and other people. Where am I at? They abandoned all the commandments of the Lord, their God. They made for themselves metal images of 2 calves. Remember, this is all recounting history. This is not new stuff. And they made an Asherah, a pole, and they worshiped all the host of heaven, and they served Baal. And they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings. They used divination and omens and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah only. Sounds like the flood again, right? The last time God was so angry with his people that he wiped them off the face of the earth except for one chosen family. And now we had 12 sons of Jacob, right? That's what the nations of Israel are, the 12 tribes. There were only 2 in the south. There was Judah and Benjamin. The 10 in the north, they're gone. So we're down to Noah and his family again, basically. And what was the promise? That a shoot will come forth from the stump of Jesse, a burned out, lifeless stump of Jesse, because Judah is going to be conquered and destroyed too in 586-87 by the Babylonians. And it's going to be in such a scourge that nobody ever thought life would come there again. It's like the image of a stump. First of all, a stump is a cut down tree. Cut it down close to the earth. Generally, it doesn't spring to life again. But it's been burned out on top of that, like you put ashes on it and burn it away. And so out of this most dead, most lifeless, unexpected place, a little sprig of green begins to spring up. That's the promise of the Messiah. He comes at the time that nobody was expecting it. On Christmas Eve, obviously, is when we talk about the birth of Jesus, and these prophecies all are fulfilled. I love what's said, when all was still and it was midnight, your almighty word descended from the royal throne. That's a passage of scripture. It actually comes from the Apocrypha, believe it or not. And it's the antiphon to the introit for Christmas Eve. And we do it every year, whether you realize it or not. It's beautiful. I like what it says, because what's going on at midnight and all is still? Not much. Everybody's asleep. Nobody's watching. Nobody's working. Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's acting. And that is the very moment in which God acts. And he does something unthinkable. Life springs forth. where nobody would have looked for it. Sounds like the tomb as well. When all was still and it was midnight, when everybody was in their bed and they were grieving and mourning of the events that had happened on Friday, nobody had any hope. When the women got up early in the morning, Sunday morning, they went to finish burying a dead body. Nobody expected to find anything. And what was there? Light and life that nobody would have anticipated. This is how God acts. Yeah. 19 says that even though Judah was preserved, Judah also did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but they walked in the customs that Israel had introduced. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel and afflicted them and gave them into the hand of plunderers until he had cast them out of his sight. And when he had torn Israel from the house of David, they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. So that goes all the way back to the beginning of the first king of the northern kingdom, right? And Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord and made them commit great sin. The people of Israel walked in all the sins that Jeroboam did. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had spoken by all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day. Where are we at for time? A few more minutes. So what's going to happen now is Assyria has conquered the northern kingdom, has carted away a lot of the people of Israel. And what do? This is a manner of warfare, is that you put people back in that country that you conquered from other places. You change the whole culture there. Instead of people who are rebellious against you, now these are people who are friendly to you. And you just destroy and wipe out that culture through intermarriage, bringing in new religion and new cultural ideas and that kind of thing. This goes on today. Probably Israel is the greatest example. You've got these contested areas. They got the Golan Heights up here on the eastern edge of the Sea of Galilee. Israel has occupied that territory. Well, I don't have an opinion on this. So people from Israel would never say it was occupied. They'd say, well, that's just Israel, But the Palestinians would say, no, that's occupied territory. And so they've got this territory here, and to show it's theirs, they moved settlers there. Build houses, build factories, build roads, do things, because what's the whole thing with property lines? That possession is 9/10 of the law. I joked about this some time ago that, you got your lawn that joins up with your neighbor's. And sometimes when he mows, it's like 3 feet into your yard. And when you mow, you push 4 feet into his, because whoever's maintaining that piece of property, that decides the line, right? See, I think it's so funny. This is the first time I've owned a property where the lines were clearly marked. There are these rebar stakes and they're in the bushes. You can't see them, but if you want to, you can pull the bushes apart and you can see the line there. And I can see that, it's like, man, because my neighbor, they don't live there anymore. Nobody lives there anymore, but they have somebody mow their lawn and they don't care, and they're mowing like 3 feet into my lawn, so whenever I mow, I go right down that line, even though it's on an incline and it's awkward and the mower keeps wanting to go this way. And
just tell them, just keep mowing over. They can do it all.
That's right. If you're going to do 3 feet into my yard, do the whole thing. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So that's what's going on here next. The king of Assyria, who's now conquered the northern kingdom, he brought people in from Babylon, from Cutha, from Ava, Hamath, Sepharvaim. It doesn't matter. He brought in foreigners and he placed them in the former northern kingdom of Israel in the cities of Samaria instead of the people of Israel. He replaced them. Isn't that a theory, a conspiracy theory today? What do they call that? The replacement theory? That all the immigrants come in and they replace other types of voters. They change the political culture of an area.
We'll probably soon see it.
And they took possession of Samaria, lived at the beginning of their dwelling there. They did not fear the Lord. They didn't know the Lord. They came from foreign countries, right? Therefore, the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So the king of Assyria was told, the nations that you've carried away and placed in the cities of Samaria do not know the law of the God of the land. Therefore, he has sent lions among them, and behold, they are killing them because they do not know the law of God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, send there one of the priests whom you carried away from there. Let him go and dwell there and teach them the law of God and the land of the land. So one of the priests whom they carried away from Samaria came and lived in Bethel and taught them how they should fear the Lord. So isn't that interesting? These people come in, they're not Jews. They don't know the God of Israel, and they don't worship him. So God sends lions that kills a bunch of them. Now they're afraid. We've angered some God here. So they appeal to the king of Assyria, and he sends them one of the Jewish priests to teach them about the laws of God of the land. Now, see, here's the thing. They're kind of like the Romans. They're polytheists. They worship many gods. So they don't have any problem accepting that there's this God of the Jews, you know. That, okay, there is a God of the Jews, but he's just one God amongst many, right? And so that land has this God. You need to give him respect. Otherwise, lions are going to come and it's going to be bad. So priests, you go down there and teach them the law of your God, the law of that land. But that doesn't mean they stop worshiping the other gods. They just include the God of Israel amongst those gods. So it says here in 29 that every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines and the high places that the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities in which they lived. By the way, in the New Testament, in the Gospels, who are some of the most hated people from the Jews' perspective? The Samaritans. This is why. Because after the northern kingdom, the Jews were carted away to Assyria in exile. The people that replaced them were not Jews. And they came to worship the God of Israel because of what's happening right now, what we're reading about, because the king of Assyria sent Jewish priests there to teach them about the ways of God. And over the centuries, they became believers in the true God. And but there was also a lot of pagan worship going on. And this comes to that woman at the well that Jesus met, right? Which is a great story. She's not a dumb woman by any means. She argues with Jesus a little bit. She asks him a lot of pressing questions. And she says at one point, our people worship God on the mountain, but your people say that Jerusalem is the only place to worship God. And Jesus says to her, truly, truly, the day is coming when all people will worship God in spirit, not on the mountain or in the Jerusalem temple. And that. So all of that has its roots right here in what's going on in this story. This is why reading Kings is important, because it gives you the underpinning to understand things that happen much later in the life of Jesus and the miracles of Jesus and that kind of thing. So anyway, the Jews at Jesus' time hated the Samaritans because they considered them half-breeds at best. They weren't pure Jews. In many cases, they weren't Jews at all. They were from Babylon, all these places, right? These countries that they imported them in from. But they were God-fearers. They came to worship the God of Israel, but they treated them like second-class citizens. And that's still going on today. There are Palestinian Christians. There are many, many Palestinian Christians that are treated like second-class citizens in the country of Israel. And again, I don't have a strong opinion on this. I mean, I don't think they should be treated like second-class citizens, but I don't know what the political solution is. That's what I mean. I can say this is bad and it shouldn't be going on, but I have no idea what the answer is to fixing the problem. That's well beyond me. Where am I at? 29? We're out of time. You want me to read or do you want me to stop? By the way, we're not meeting next week.
Better finish it, though. Better finish it.
Then I'll finish this chapter.
No, that goes on.
At 29?
29 to 40.
It's just 2 paragraphs, right? But every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines of the high places that the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities in which they lived. The men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, The men of Cuth made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima. I don't know what any of those are. They're all false gods. The Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Seraphites burned their children to the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of the Sepharvaim. They also at the same time that they're doing all of this, they feared the Lord, Yahweh, and they appointed from among themselves all sorts of people as priests of the high places, who sacrificed for them in the shrines of the high places. So they feared the Lord, but they also served their own gods, after the manner of the nations from among whom they had been carried away. To this day, they do according to the former manner. They do not fear the Lord. They do not follow the statutes or the rules or the law or the commandment that the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. The Lord made a covenant with them and commanded them, you shall not fear other gods or bow yourselves to them or serve them or sacrifice to them, but you shall fear the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt with great power and with an outstretched arm. You shall bow yourselves to him, and to him you shall sacrifice. And the statutes and the rules and the law and the commandments that he wrote to you, you shall always be careful to do. You shall not fear other gods. That's the first commandment, right? And you shall not forget the covenant that I made with you. You shall not fear other gods, but you shall fear the Lord your God, and he will deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. However, they would not listen. They did according to their former manner. So these nations feared the Lord, and they also served their carved images. Their children did likewise, and their children's children, as their fathers did. So they do to this day. So ends the northern kingdom. So chapter 18, we pick up with Hezekiah, king in Judah, who's a reformer and a pretty good king, as kings of Israel go.
Which isn't a real good recommendation.
No, unfortunately. Let me see here. Where's my people? Hello, people. Hi. Well, that ends our Bible study for today. We'll see you again next time. Thank you.